I've been with no one, she confessed. The drifter kissed her and said, now you're with me. The wind didn't howl. It screamed. It tore through the broken shutters of Clara Whitfield's cabin like a thing possessed, rattling the last of the glass in the windowpane, kicking up dust that tasted like rust and regret. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Her hands, calloused, cracked, stained with dirt and dried milk, rested on her knees, gripping the hem of her husband's coat. He'd worn it to church on Sunday. Now he was 6 feet under, and the earth had swallowed him without so much as a sigh. She hadn't cried. Not when they lowered him into the ground. Not when the preacher said, dust to dust, and the wind stole his name from the air. Not even when the child, her boy, 7 years old, eyes too big for his face, clutched her leg and whispered, Mama, is Papa sleeping? She just stared at the empty doorway. Outside, the prairie stretched dead and brown, cracked open like an old bone. No grass. No cattle. Just dust, silence, and the skeletal remains of what used to be a farm. The well ran dry 2 weeks ago. The last sack of flour went yesterday. The cow. She'd sold it for 3 pennies and a chunk of rancid cheese. The child hadn't eaten real bread in 10 days. A sound came then. Not the wind. Not the coyotes. Boots. Slow. Heavy. Dragging. Clara didn't turn. She knew who it was before she saw him. A man stumbled into the yard, bent low against the storm, shoulders hunched like a man carrying the weight of 100 graves. His hat was torn, his coat patched with burlap and prayer. Dust coated his skin like ash. But what caught her, the thing that froze her breath, was what he carried. In his left hand, a rifle, barrel blackened with smoke, grip worn smooth by sweat and blood. In his right, a loaf of bread. Wrapped in dirty cloth. Still warm. He stopped at the edge of the porch. Didn't speak. Didn't raise his head. Clara finally turned. Her voice didn't shake. Not because she was strong. Because she was hollow. Did you kill him? The man didn't answer. He just looked at her. And in that look, cold as the grave, heavy as a stone, she saw something worse than guilt. Recognition. Like he'd known her before. Like he'd waited for this moment. The wind howled again, tearing at the roof, whipping grit into her eyes. She didn't wipe them. Let them burn. Let them water. Let the world see how little she had left to lose. He took a step forward. Then another. The bread trembled in his hand. His scarred fingers, long, knotted, one thumb missing its tip, brushed the fabric as if afraid to touch it. Clara stood. No fear in her stance. No anger. Just emptiness. And beneath it, something stirring. Something dangerous. You're not from here, she said. He exhaled. A slow, shuddering thing. No, he murmured. I ain't. She stepped down off the porch. Barefoot. Feet cracked and bleeding. The dust clung to her skin like a second layer. Then why are you here? He lifted his eyes. For the first time, she saw them. Blue. So blue they hurt. Like ice over a drowned man's grave. I heard your husband was shot, he said. She didn't flinch. But I didn't do it. She studied him. The way his boots creaked when he shifted. The way his shadow stretched long behind him, thin as a ghost. The way his mouth moved, like he was saying words he'd forgotten how to say. She reached out. Not for the rifle. Not for the bread. She touched his chest. Right over his heart. Cold. Beating. Alive. You smell like gunpowder, she whispered. He didn't pull away. I know, he said. She pulled her hand back. Then, softly, come inside. He followed. No thanks. No questions. Just silence. And the scent of bread. Warm. Real. Sweet. The first thing that had smelled good in months. Inside, the boy stirred in his cot. He coughed. A dry, rattling thing. Clara turned to him. Then back to the stranger. "You'll eat," she said. He nodded. She set the bread on the table. He didn't reach for it. She didn't ask his name. She already knew. Some men don't come to a place unless they're running from something. Or running toward someone. She sat across from him. The fire crackled. The wind screamed. And for the first time since her husband died, she felt something. Not grief. Not loneliness. But dread. The kind that settles in your bones. The kind that says, you're not alone anymore. And worse, you never will be. Wind howls. Gunshot echoes, distant. Fading. Silence. The next morning, the bread was gone. Half eaten. The man slept on the floor, curled beside the hearth, one hand still wrapped around the rifle. The boy didn't speak. But he held the other half of the loaf to his chest. And when Clara walked outside to check the well, she found blood on the doorstep. Not his. Not hers. And tied to the fence post, a sheriff's badge. Still warm. Still wet. Clara knelt in the dust, her fingers hovering just above the dark smear near the threshold. It had dried in streaks, thin as a widow's veil, thick as a sin too heavy to wash away. She didn't touch it. Not yet. She smelled it first. Gunpowder. Iron. And beneath that, whiskey. She knew that scent. Had smelled it on her husband's breath the night he came home late, eyes wild, boots caked with mud from the riverbank. He'd whispered something about a man who owed him money. Then he kissed her forehead and went to bed without undressing. She never asked who. Now she knew. Someone had come for him. And someone else had finished the job. Behind her, the boy coughed again, dry, rattling, like a wind through broken reeds. She didn't turn. Couldn't. Her eyes stayed locked on the badge pinned to the fence post. A silver star. Dented. Smudged with dirt and something darker. Sheriff of Red Hollow. She'd seen that badge before. 3 months ago. At the general store. The sheriff had bought 3 loaves of bread. Paid in coins. Smiled at her boy. Said, "Little fellow's got his daddy's eyes." He'd been kind. Too kind. Now he was dead. And the man inside, the one who carried bread and silence, hadn't moved since dawn. Silas, she still didn't know his real name, sat by the hearth, staring into the embers. His scarred hand rested on his knee, fingers curled like claws around the grip of his rifle. The loaf was gone. Only crumbs remained on the table. He hadn't eaten all of it. Just enough to keep going. The boy stirred. Reached out. Not for food. For Silas's hand. The man flinched. Just once. Then let the child's small fingers curl around his thumb. Clara watched. Something cracked inside her. Not grief. Worse. Hope. She sat across from him. No words. Just the crackle of dying fire. The boy slept again, head resting against Silas's leg. Jessie didn't push him away. "You're not a killer," Clara said at last. He didn't answer. "I've seen men who kill," she continued. "They don't leave half a loaf. They don't let children touch them." He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. Hollow. Like he hadn't slept in weeks. Maybe years. I ain't here to hurt you, he murmured. Then why are you here? He didn't answer right away. Then, he lifted his left hand. The scarred one. The one with the missing thumb. This, he said. She leaned closer. The scar ran from his wrist to his knuckles, not one wound, but many. Old burns. Knife slashes. A deep gouge along the palm like something had tried to peel it off. What happened? She whispered. He closed his fist. Men took my wife. She didn't breathe. They said I stole from them, he went on. Said I owed gold. But I didn't take nothing. Just, followed her trail. After the fever took her. After they buried her under a cottonwood tree with no name. Clara's throat tightened. Who were they? He looked at her then. Not with rage. With shame. The same men who shot your husband. Silence. The wind tapped at the window. A single drop of rain, first in 6 weeks, splashed against the glass. The boy whimpered in his sleep. Jesse reached into his coat. Pulled out a folded piece of paper. Torn at the edge. Stained with blood. He placed it on the table. Clara didn't open it. She already knew what it was. A warrant. Her husband's name printed bold at the top. Thomas Whitfield, wanted dead or alive. Reward, 300. Beneath it, scrawled in ink so faded it looked like tears, he knew about Nellie. He was gonna tell. Nellie. The name hung in the air like smoke. Jesse didn't say anything. But his eyes told her everything. That woman. His wife. She'd been more than a memory. She'd been a ghost. And Thomas Whitfield. He hadn't just been shot. He'd been silenced. Because he knew too much. Clara stood. Walked to the cupboard. Pulled out the last tin of lard. Set it on the table. Then she pulled the rifle from the corner. Loaded it. Slow. Deliberate. She didn't aim at him. Didn't point at the door. She held it across her lap. Like a child. You're staying, she said. He blinked. Why? Because if you leave, she said, they'll find us. She nodded toward the badge. Because they'll think you killed the sheriff. And you'll be next. Jesse stared at her. Then slowly, he reached out. Not for the rifle. Not for the bread. He touched her hand. Where it gripped the stock. His scarred fingers brushed hers. Warm. Alive. Real. I won't let them take you, he whispered. She didn't pull away. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. Just nodded. Outside, the wind picked up. And somewhere far off, a train whistle. Long lonely. Coming. Train whistle fades. Boots crunch on dry earth, closer now. Dog barks. Then another. 3. Clara didn't move. Jesse didn't move. But the boy, her husband's son, Jesse's son, no one's son, opened his eyes. And whispered, for the first time in months, Mama, then, who is he? The boy's voice was a crack in the wall. A single word, who is he? And suddenly, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of ghosts. Full of lies. Full of blood that wouldn't wash off. Clara didn't answer right away. She just looked at Jesse. At the way his breath hitched when the child spoke. At the way his scarred hand curled into a fist, not in anger, but in fear. Like he'd been waiting for this moment since the day he left Nellie's grave. Jesse stood slowly. Not to threaten. Not to flee. Just, to stand. He moved like a man carrying a coffin on his back. The rifle still rested across Clara's lap. He didn't reach for it. Didn't glance toward it. His eyes stayed locked on the boy. The boy stared back. Small. Thin. Eyes too old for his face. He didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just waited. Like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to tell him the truth. Jesse took a step forward. Then another. He knelt. Not in prayer. In surrender. His knee cracked against the floorboards. The dust rose around him like a ghost rising from the earth. Your name, he said softly, is Eli. The boy blinked. Eli. Jesse nodded. Your mama called you that. Before the fever took her. Clara's chest tightened. Before the fever. That was the story they'd told her. That Eli's mother had died of sickness. That Thomas had taken pity on the orphan. That Eli was his now. But Thomas hadn't taken pity. Thomas had taken a secret. And kept it. Jesse reached into his coat again. This time, he pulled out something small. Wrapped in oilcloth. He unfolded it slowly. A lock of hair. Dark brown. Soft. Tied with a faded blue ribbon. He held it out. To Eli. The boy didn't take it. Didn't move. Jesse's voice broke then. Not loud. Just, broken. I carried this every day, he whispered. Since the day she died. She tucked it in my pocket before she went to sleep. Said if I ever found you, you'd know it was yours. Eli stared at the hair. Then at Jesse. And for the first time, he reached out. Not for the hair. For Jesse's scarred hand. He touched it. Gently. Like he was testing if the man was real. Jesse flinched. Then let him. The boy traced the scars. One by one. As if reading a map. This, Eli said, pointing to the deep gouge along the palm, was from the knife. Jesse froze. How do you know that? Eli didn't look up. Mama told me, he said. She said Papa got hurt saving her from a man who wanted to take her away. She said he bled for days. And she cried, because she knew he'd never stop running. Silence. The fire popped. A spark leapt into the air and vanished. Jesse closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his cheek. Not for himself. For her. For Nellie. For the woman who'd loved him enough to die. And for the boy who'd lived long enough to remember her. Clara stood. Walked to the window. Looked out. The sun was low. Painting the prairie in gold and ash. And beyond it, smoke. Thin. Winding. Rising. From the north. 3 miles. 5. It didn't matter. They were coming. The posse. The ones who'd killed the sheriff. The ones who'd hunted Jesse. The ones who'd let a man die for knowing too much. She turned back. Jesse was still kneeling. Eli's small fingers still curled around his thumb. Like he'd found his anchor. Like he'd finally come home. Clara walked to the cupboard. Pulled out the last of the flour. Set it beside the tin of lard. Then she took the rifle. Unloaded it. Set the bullets on the table. One by one. Click. 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 Jesse looked up. What are you doing? I'm not letting you fight them alone, she said. You don't even know why they're after me. I know enough. She picked up one bullet. Rolled it between her fingers. It's not about gold. No, it's not about revenge. No, she met his eyes. It's about a boy. Jesse swallowed. They think he's Thomas Whitfield's son. They think he's yours, Clara corrected. And if they take him, they'll kill him. Or worse, they'll sell him. To a mine. To a brothel. To a man who wants a quiet child who won't ask questions. Jesse's breath caught. They lied to me, he whispered. About the gold. About the train heist. I didn't steal nothing. Braxton spat. Doesn't matter. You killed our sheriff. Now we've got a warrant for the boy too. He's property. Property of the state. And property don't walk free. Clara looked at Eli. The boy was staring at her. Not afraid. Curious. Like he was waiting to see what she'd do. She turned back to Braxton. Then take me, she said. Silence. Even the wind held its breath. Braxton blinked. What? I'm his mother, Clara said. Jesse turned sharply. No, she silenced him with a look. I buried his father 3 days ago, she went on. I fed him when he starved. I washed his wounds when he cried. I loved him when no one else would. So if you want him, you take me first. Braxton narrowed his eyes. You ain't his mama. I'm the only one who ever was. She took another step. Closer. The revolver in her boot felt cold. Heavy. Real. Braxton leaned down from his saddle. Why'd you kiss him? He asked. Clara froze. Jesse stiffened. No one had spoken of it. No one had dared. But Braxton had seen. From the ridge. From the trees. When she kissed Jesse. Before they left the cabin. I kissed him, she said slowly, because he was the last man who remembered her. Who? Nellie. Braxton's face changed. Just slightly. A flicker. A crack. Like someone had touched a wound he thought was buried. You knew her? He didn't answer. But his hand twitched toward his belt. Not for his gun. For a locket. Same as Jesse's. Dented. Cracked. Glass missing. He opened it. Inside, a portrait. Of Nellie. Smiling. In the same blue dress. The same ribbon tied in her hair. Clara's breath caught. You were the one who gave her the fever medicine. Braxton nodded. I was supposed to kill her. Jesse's hands clenched. You what? I was paid, Braxton said, voice hollow now. To make sure she never talked. To make sure she never told anyone about the money. About the train heist. About how Thomas Whitfield stole the gold, and hid it inside the boy's cradle. Jesse staggered back. As if struck. Eli clutched the locket tighter. Mama, he whispered. Clara didn't turn. She kept her eyes on Braxton. And you? She asked. Why didn't you kill her? Braxton looked down. I loved her. The words hung there. Like a confession carved into stone. I loved her more than I loved my job. More than I loved my oath. I tried to warn her. But Thomas got to her first. Poisoned her tea. Said it was, for the child's sake. Jesse took a step forward. Then another. He dropped his rifle. Let it fall into the dust. I'm done running, he said. Braxton frowned. What? I'm done letting them decide who lives. Who dies. Who belongs to whom. He reached into his coat. Pulled out the last thing he carried. A single bullet. Blackened. Burnt at the tip. He held it up. This, he said, was in her pocket when she died. He looked at Eli. My son. Clara's heart stopped. Jesse didn't say it. But everyone heard it. My son. Not Thomas's. Not the widow's. His. Jesse turned to Braxton. I'll give you the gold. Braxton scoffed. There ain't no gold. There is. Jesse looked at Eli. The cradle. The false bottom. The iron plate beneath the lining. It's all there. Buried under the floorboards of the cabin. Braxton's eyes widened. You knew. I figured it out after she died, Jesse said. He kept the key around his neck. Always wore it. Even in bed. I watched him sleep. 4 months. Until I saw him slip it off, once. When he thought no one was looking. Jesse took a deep breath. I'll lead you to it. Braxton hesitated. Then nodded. Fine. But the boy stays. Jesse shook his head. No, he looked at Clara. Give me the revolver. She didn't ask why. Didn't hesitate. She pulled it from her boot. Held it out. Jesse took it. Turned to Braxton. I won't let you take him. Braxton raised his rifle. Then die for him. Jesse didn't blink. He looked at Eli. At Clara. At the moon. And then, he kissed her. Not like before. Not quick. Not desperate. This time, it was slow. Deep. Full of everything he couldn't say. Of Nellie's laughter. Of Eli's first steps. Of the silence between heartbeats. Of grief. Of mercy. Of love. Clara didn't pull away. She kissed him back. With everything she had. With every tear she'd swallowed. With every night she'd spent pretending she didn't care. With every dawn she'd waited for death. And when they parted, his lips were wet. With tears. With blood. With truth. Jesse turned to Braxton. Shoot me, he said. Braxton frowned. What? Shoot me, Jesse repeated. Right here. Right now. He placed the revolver against his own temple. I'll give you the gold. I'll give you the boy. But you don't get her. He looked at Clara. Tell him, Clara. She didn't speak. She just nodded. Slow. Firm. Jesse smiled. Just once. Then, he pulled the trigger. Gunshot. Echoes across the prairie. Wind stops. Eli screams, not in fear. In recognition. Because the bullet didn't kill him. It shattered the locket in his hand. And from inside, a folded piece of paper. Slid out. Unfurled. On the ground. Written in faded ink, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let them take Eli. The gold isn't mine. It's his. And he's not a secret. He's a promise. Nellie Braxton dropped his rifle. Staggered back. No, Jesse collapsed. Not dead. Bleeding. From the shoulder. The bullet had grazed him. He'd aimed high. Intentionally. He'd fired the gun. But he hadn't pulled the trigger. He'd let Clara do it. Because she'd slipped the hammer back. While kissing him. And he'd known. He'd always known. She wouldn't let him die. Not yet. Not while Eli still needed him. Braxton fell to his knees. Crying. Not for the gold. Not for justice. But for Nellie. For the woman he'd loved. And lost. For the boy he'd sworn to destroy. And now, couldn't bear to touch. Jesse lay in the dirt. Blood seeping into the earth. Eli ran to him. Kneeled. Pressed his forehead to Jesse's chest. Whispered, I'm not alone anymore. Jesse opened his eyes. Looked at Clara. Smiled. I told you, he rasped, now you're with me. Wind returns. A lone coyote howls, far off. Train whistle, distant. Fading. Church bell tolls again. Once. Twice. 3 times. They buried him under the cottonwood tree. No coffin. No stone. Just 2 wagon spokes lashed together with twine, and a single dried rose, purple, brittle, smelling faintly of lavender soap, tucked beneath the cross. Clara didn't weep. She hadn't cried since the day she buried Thomas. But now, as the last of the dirt settled over Jesse's chest, her fingers lingered on the earth. Warm. Still. Alive. Eli sat beside her, small hands folded in his lap, the locket around his neck. The boy didn't speak. Not anymore. But he didn't need to. He carried Jesse's silence now. Like an inheritance. Braxton had left at dawn. He took nothing. Not the gold. Not the bread. Not even the bullet that had grazed Jesse's shoulder. He just knelt in the dirt where Jesse had bled. And whispered, I'm sorry. Then he rode away, alone. The gold was real. Buried beneath the floorboards, wrapped in oilcloth, tied with Nellie's ribbon. 16 bars. Enough to buy a town. Enough to buy freedom. Clara hadn't taken it. She'd left it there. Where Jesse had hidden it. Where Nellie had dreamed of it. Because some things weren't meant to be owned. They were meant to be remembered. The posse never came back. Word spread fast, that the outlaw Jesse Holloway had died saving a widow and her boy. That he'd given up the gold to spare them. That he'd kissed the woman who loved him, and then let her save him. Some called him a fool. Others called him a saint. Clara didn't care what they called him. She knew what he was. A man who carried love like a wound. Who bled for a ghost. Who gave his life so a child could live. That night, she packed their few things. 1 change of clothes. A tin of lard. 2 canteens. The rifle. And the loaf of bread, half eaten, still wrapped in burlap. She didn't take the money. Didn't take the house. Didn't take the memories. She took Eli. And the quiet. They walked south. No destination. No map. Just the horizon, and the wind. 3 days passed. No towns. No roads. Just dust, stars, and the ache of a heart learning how to beat again. On the 4th morning, Eli woke before dawn. He stood by the fire pit. Stared at the sky. Then turned to Clara. I heard him, he said. She froze. Who? The man with the scarred hand. Her throat tightened. What did he say? Eli looked down. He said. Don't let them forget me. Clara sat beside him. Wrapped her arm around his shoulders. You don't have to, she whispered. He leaned into her. For the first time since his mother died, he cried. Soft. Quiet. Like a whisper between heartbeats. She held him. Let him fall apart. And when he was done, she pulled back. Looked into his eyes. Do you want to go home? He shook his head. Home's not a place, he said. She smiled, just a little. No, she agreed. It's not. They kept walking. Through canyons where the rocks wore the shapes of faces. Past dry riverbeds where bones of long-dead buffalo lay half-buried. Through fields of wild sage that smelled like grief and healing. At night, she sang. Low. Hollow. A tune Nellie used to hum. Jessie had taught it to her. In the cabin. Before the kiss. Before the gunshot. Before the truth. She didn't know the words. But she knew the rhythm. And Eli would hum along. Sometimes, in the dark, she swore she heard another voice. Faint. Whispering. Like wind through leaves. You're with me. She never told Eli. But sometimes, when the coyotes howled, she'd pause. Listen. And answer. Back. Just once. A low, soft sound. Not a cry. Not a song. Something older. Something deeper. Like a promise. On the seventh night, they camped near a ridge where the stars fell like ash. Eli slept curled against her side. She sat upright. Staring at the sky. The moon hung low. Pale. Watching. Like someone had left a lantern burning in heaven. She reached into her pocket. Pulled out the last thing Jessie had given her. Not the locket. Not the bread. A scrap of paper. Folded small. Tucked inside his boot. She hadn't read it until now. Unfurled it slowly. His handwriting. Shaky. Like he'd written it while bleeding. Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I'm not dead. Not really. I'm in the wind. In the bread you eat. In the way Eli looks at the sun. In the silence after the gunshot. You said you'd been with no one. But you lied. You've always been with me. Now you're with me. She pressed the paper to her chest. Closed her eyes. And whispered, I've been with no one. A pause. The wind stirred. Coyotes answered, from the hills. 7 voices. Long lonesome. Beautiful. She smiled. Then finished, she confessed. Another pause. The wind carried her words. Down the ridge. Into the valley. To the trees. To the stones. To the bones beneath the earth. And then, one coyote howled differently. Not high. Not wild. But slow. Sweet. Like a lullaby. Like a kiss. Clara opened her eyes. Looked at Eli. Sleeping. Safe. Whole. She reached out. Touched his cheek. Then lifted her face to the sky. And whispered, now you're with me. Wind howls. Coyotes sing. Train whistle fades into distance. Church bell tolls once more. Silence. Then, a single note. From far off. A harmonica. Playing the same tune. Soft. Broken. Alive. Clara didn't turn. She didn't need to. She already knew. Some men don't die. They become the wind. The bread. The silence between heartbeats. The kiss that breaks the world open. And sometimes, when the coyotes howl at dusk, they don't sound like ghosts. They sound like love.